Nobody in that grand dining hall could understand a single word the billionaire was saying. The room was silent, tense, and awkward, until a voice from the corner broke it. It wasn't a diplomat. It wasn't an interpreter. It was the maid, and she spoke in flawless Chinese. The guests had arrived expecting a typical high-profile charity dinner, polite small talk, slow music, and speeches they could half listen to while thinking about their own schedules. What they didn't expect was that the guest of honor, one of the richest men in Asia, would walk in, take the microphone, and speak only in Mandarin Chinese. At first, people thought he was simply greeting the crowd before switching to English. They smiled politely, clapped at what seemed to be a pause, and waited. But minutes passed, and it became clear he wasn't switching languages. He kept speaking, his tone calm but deliberate, his hands gesturing slightly as if explaining something important. Around the tables, guests shifted uncomfortably. Some tried to catch words they recognized. A few discreetly glanced at their phones, probably searching for translations, but the speech was too fast for that. Most simply sat in polite silence, nodding faintly, hoping someone else would respond first. It wasn't arrogance. The billionaire was making a point. People later learned that he had been traveling the world speaking only in Mandarin to see how people reacted when faced with a language barrier they didn't expect. He wanted to see who would step forward, who would try, and who would remain passive. On that night, the answer was, everyone remained passive. Everyone, except for the maid. She had been working quietly in the background since before the guests arrived. Clearing glasses, placing fresh napkins, carrying trays. Like many staff members, she was invisible in the way service workers often are in luxury spaces, present, but rarely acknowledged. Her name was Amina, and she had been with the hotel for just over a year. What nobody knew was that years earlier, Amina had studied in Beijing. She had spent nearly 5 years there, first as a language student, then as a small business owner. Life had brought her back to the United States, but her Mandarin never left her. She hadn't spoken it in public for a long time, mostly because she didn't have anyone to speak it with. As the billionaire continued, Amina realized he was telling a story about his childhood, about his mother selling vegetables in a rural market, about saving coins in a jar to pay for school, about the lesson his father taught him. That wealth is meaningless if you can't connect with people. She glanced at the tables of dignitaries, CEOs, and philanthropists. They were all waiting for someone to translate. The official interpreter, who was supposed to be present, had been delayed in traffic. No one dared to interrupt. Amina hesitated. She wasn't supposed to speak to guests, unless addressed directly. But she also felt something stir inside her. She knew exactly what he was saying, and she couldn't just let his words vanish into the air unheard. She stepped forward, placed the tray down, and in clear Mandarin said, "Would you like me to translate for them?" The room went still. The billionaire's eyes widened slightly, then softened into a smile. He nodded. Amina turned to the audience and began translating, sentence by sentence. Her voice was steady, her tone carrying the weight of a story. As she spoke, the mood in the room shifted. Guests leaned forward. They began to react, smiling at his humor, frowning at his hardships, nodding at his lessons. The billionaire spoke for another 15 minutes, and Amina translated every word without missing a beat. She didn't just translate literally, she captured the emotion, the pauses, the rhythm. By the time he finished, the entire hall erupted into applause, not only for him but for her. When the event ended, the billionaire walked straight to her. In Mandarin, he told her she had not only made his evening, but had restored his faith in human connection. He explained his experiment, that he deliberately avoided English to see who would step beyond their comfort zone. Most people, he said, avoided discomfort. They waited for someone else to solve it. But she didn't wait. Amina smiled and told him something her own mother used to say, "If you understand, you have a responsibility to speak." The next day, the story spread, not because the billionaire had spoken only Chinese, but because a maid had become the bridge between worlds that night. Many guests admitted later that they had felt embarrassed, realizing they had resources, education, and confidence, yet none of them stepped forward. It was the woman carrying trays who had the courage to act. In the weeks that followed, the billionaire kept in touch with Amina. He invited her to visit one of his companies in Shanghai, and though she was hesitant, she eventually went. That trip changed her life. He offered her a position as a cultural liaison, a role where her language skills and cross-cultural understanding could be put to use daily. She accepted, not because it was glamorous, but because she knew she could connect people in ways most overlooked. Years later, when she spoke about that night, she said she hadn't thought of it as brave. To her, it was simple. If you can help someone be heard, you help. And that was the lesson the billionaire had been trying to teach all along. He had spoken only in Chinese to see if anyone valued connection enough to push through awkwardness. And the one person who did was the one most people had overlooked. The irony, of course, was not lost on him. The wealthy, the educated, the socially powerful, all had remained silent. But the maid, who understood both the language and the deeper meaning, had spoken. To this day, in his speeches, still often delivered in Mandarin, he tells her story. And every time, he ends it with the same sentence she told him that night. If you understand, you have a responsibility to speak.